Good morning, everybody. Just a sound check.
Morning, Eric.
Morning, Charles. Morning, everybody. Welcome to the session.
Good morning.
Just allowing lots of people into the meeting. We'll look in a few seconds' time. Just a sound check for those who've joined. Good morning. We're just busy admitting more people into the session. We'll be with you in a few minutes' time. Good morning, everybody. It's great seeing everybody at the Transport Forum again, and just admitting people to the session, and proudly being hosted by Bid Cargo today. And yeah, so please remember to keep yourselves on mute. We're doing it in a meeting fashion. So we like people to communicate effectively, but keep yourselves on mute. We will give you opportunity to unmute and ask questions during the questions and answers session. Should something go wrong during the session, then keep an eye on your inbox and we will send you an email out to join the session again. So let me share my screen. You can just get my screen sorted here. So there's our exciting program for today. We're talking about the air cargo value chains, the 7th of July, 2022. You obviously have noticed that all participation in the Transport Forum was complimentary, and that's including the content, the presentations, and so on. That's uploaded to the web. So we have valued sponsors making the Transport Forum possible. And we would like to quickly give recognition to the alliances and the sponsors of the Transport Forum. And we're going to do a little bit fun. So there's going to be prize winning this morning. And there will be 3 lucky people. Well, not lucky because you deserve it, winning a prize, that will win a power bank and a nice little lantern. Should you answer the questions correctly. So we'll, at the end of this short presentation, that we tell you about our alliances and the sponsors of the Transport Forum, we will ask 3 questions. And the person who answers the question correct in the chat room will be the winner of the prize. So there will be 3 persons, in other words, winning prizes. So hence you need to listen carefully what we say, and you might be one of the winners of the prizes. So ladies and gents, we're proud being an formal alliance with very important industry bodies in South Africa. There you see them, South African Association of Freight Forwarders, and we are proud to announce that we also now have the Road Freight Association as part of the Transport Forum. Gavin Kelly is going to tell us much more about that just now. We've also got the South African Express Parcel Association, the South African Bus Operators Association, African Road Industry Association, and Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. So what we do with these associates and sponsors is what we do is we put up a slide telling you more about this association or a sponsor. We give opportunity for that organization to say a few words themselves. Should nobody from their side say anything, then I say a few words. So you're welcome to interrupt me if you should be one of those organizations. You want to say a few words, you're welcome to interrupt me in the process. So let's continue then and listen carefully because you need to get the answers for the competition after. So let's talk about the Road Freight Association. Proud to announce Gavin Kelly and team, thank you for joining the Transport Forum and the Formal Alliance, and over to you to say a few words. Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you very much, Harry, and I'm not going to take a lot of time. I'd just like to thank you for the privilege for being able to participate in the Transport Forum. I think we've participated as presenters and speakers for a number of years, and Harry has tried for a number of years to get me over the table. He's finally got it right. Freight Association is the largest employer in the road freight and logistics sector, and we are trying to resolve a number of critical issues that you see happening around us. And the protests on the road today around fuel is not something we can actually solve right now, but we have tried to put some pressure into government in terms of having a long-term resolve in terms of that. My final statement really is I'm really, as the CEO of the RFA, very proud to be associated with all of your other partners, because logistics and the logistics supply chain is what is going to keep us going, and if we don't keep that running efficiently, we'll be stuck. Thank you very much again for allowing us to participate. Good luck to the speakers and to everyone here today. please enjoy the presentations today. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Gavin. Much appreciated and looking forward to working with you. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much, Gavin. Right, ladies and gents, we've got the South African Bus Operators Association. So they represent the bus and coach industry and play a vital role in the social and economic development of the country. Thank you very much, Basic Governor and team, for supporting the Transport Forum. We've got the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. I know there's somebody from SAFA who want to say a few words this morning. Janita, I think she's joining us a little bit later. So they established, you can see already in 1921, so a national association with members throughout the Republic of South Africa. They represent the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, the freight forwarding industry. Thank you very much, so. Then the South African Express Parcel Association. I know we've got the CEO online, Gary. I don't know if you want to say a few words.
Harry, I'm sorry, as usual with these darn things, you get to the final crunch, I lose sound on my speakers, but I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, Harry, thanks once again for the opportunity to participate in your forum and to expose people to some of the things going on in the air cargo value chain. I mean, and from a SAPA perspective, you know, our association with the Transport Forum is one that we really cherish. And I hope that everybody today enjoys the speakers. So thanks, Harry.
Thank you so much, Gary. Appreciate it, your support a lot. Thank you very much. So ARIA, African Rail Industry Association, doing lots of work in actually getting our railways in South Africa revitalized again. Third party access, very important, getting the rail policy implemented. So thank you very much, Marcella and team, for the very important work you guys are doing. Chartered Institute for Logistics and Transport, operating in the transport sector in South Africa. Thank you very much, SILSA. And we also form an alliance in these media houses, Freight News, Railways Africa, and Engineering News. Looking at Freight News, I don't know if somebody from Freight News want to say a few words. Established, innovative, effective since 1953. If you want to know anything about the logistics environment, you really need to subscribe to Freight News. Great news. I do a lot of research, and these people help me quite a lot to obtain topics and content for the Transport Forum events. I can't do without Namibia's Freight News. Thank you very much for your kind support. We've got a Railways Africa magazine, Clifford Dean and team. It's African content specialist, trade, technical business to business online publication, covering all aspects of the rail sector. And then Creamer Media's Engineering News. I would like to show you their weekly update video. So just bear with me for a moment.
Hello and welcome to the roundup of this week's edition of the Engineering News and Mining Weekly magazine, published on Friday, 8 July 2022. In this week's cover article, Engineering News and Mining Weekly Senior Deputy Editor Skalk Burger writes that 6 land-based borders have been prioritized for a one-stop border management rollout. South Africa is creating a Border Management Authority, or BMA, that will unify the border control functions and processes from various national departments. 6 land-based ports of entry have been identified to be the first forerunners of one-stop border posts, which will see the BMA deploy personnel, information technology systems, and intelligence and information sharing systems to improve the efficiency of immigration and the movement of goods. The engineering news features focus on steel, where the South African Institute of Steel Construction sees a positive outlook despite new challenges. Water engineering, infrastructure and reservoirs, where the Blue Drop regulation program aims to improve the water value chain. And testing, inspection and certification services, where petrol refinery closures directly affect a testing company. The Mining Weekly features focus on mining in South America, where a Canadian miner continues to deliver exploration success in Chile and Argentina. This week's business leader is Keith Michael, CEO of Lebone Litho Printers. And as this week's cartoon shows, now is the time to act firmly against the predatory elite who took this country to the brink and have left a trail of destruction in their wake. And while the prosecution authorities need to act with vigor, President Cyril Ramaphosa should also accelerate his official response against corruption. We hope you enjoy this week's edition of Creamer Media's Engineering News and Mining Weekly, the magazine that offers you news about developments in the real economy. Happy reading and see you next time.
Great, thank you, Engineering News. Really appreciate it. I want to mention as well is that Bid Air Cargo is sponsoring a write-up on today's event, and Liesl Venter, our journalist, specialist journalist, she's going to do the write-up for us, sponsored by Bid Air Cargo. Thank you very much for our hosting company. Right, so Bid Air Cargo. Obviously, Marie Ossaert will just now give us an introduction when she officially welcome us, but Bid Air Cargo is also a gold sponsor of the Transport Forum and is the leading cargo airline, providing express airport-to-airport solutions and related services to the courier and express logistics industry. Thank you very much, Bid Air Cargo, for your kind support and for hosting us today. We really appreciate it. Global Trade Solution, Customs Connect and Consulting Services since 1999. Delivers innovative technology and consulting services to the international trade and supply chain community. Ctrack is a platinum sponsor of the Transport Forum. It's a leading global service as a service and big data company for vehicle tracking, fleet management, and insurance telematics solutions. Thank you very much, Ctrack, for your kind support. They've also been involved with the Transport Forum since inception more than 15 years ago. University of Johannesburg, Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management. We've also got the Institute for Transport and Logistics Studies, also mentoring myself a lot, Prof. Jackie, Prof. Nadine Pisa, and a lot of them. Thank you very much for your kind support, also all these years involved with the Transport Forum. Then we've got Ticket Pro Travel, excellent solutions for the corporate environment. They are definitely very competent online booking tool for all your corporate travel needs. And obviously, you can get all the links on the Transport website to all these organizations. You can see Traveler Predictor, Business Guardian, Cutting Edge Innovation. So it's an online corporate travel booking tool with everything you need and nothing you don't want. Also, the same group, they've got the Ticket Pro Smart Tab solution. Includes key features like comprehensive route management, flexible passenger payment methods, flexible route and fare product setup, shift and dispatch management, cash system inspection tools, and comprehensive MIS tools. MIS stands for Management Information Systems. Thank you very much to Ticket Pro Smart Tab. JC Auditors. Certification, compliance, one solution. They are SANA's accredited certification body providing internationally recognized certifications. It's all about compliance, also very much involved in the road transport management system, playing a major role in making sure that one can self-regulate, which is so important nowadays. BizCo, somebody from BizCo this morning to say a few words. So BizCo, practice effective logistics. They create value-added processes for your company while improving comprehensive with internationally accredited courses. Thank you very much, BizCo. Sutari. Impact engineers, consulting engineers, more than 10 years already, gold sponsor of the Transport Forum, previously known as Oricon. Consulting engineers you need to talk to if you need any planning in terms of transport infrastructure. Mobility and Inway, they unfortunately leaving the Transport Forum now, but not as participants, and they've been supporting us for many years, and we still appreciate them. Unitron Supply Chain Solutions. So they're a leading provider of integrated transportation, warehousing, and supply chain-based services to customers with a variety of needs, offering bespoke value propositions in each segment. Thank you, Unitron, for your gold sponsorship. Standard Bank, over 159 years now of experience. They believe that dreams matter and together they can make them a reality. Jackie Bell from Standard Bank, she also supports us for supported us for many years, and she's also very much involved in the road transport management system. Thank you, Standard Bank, for your gold sponsorship. Kuba, they transform ticketing. Part of the ICM Mobility Group, enables public and private to move into the digital era. You can see they're doing journey planning, smart ticketing, streamlining electronic payments, shaping the digital transformation of the mobility sector. Now, while we're talking here public transport, I sadly want to announce that those of you who've known Paul Browning, he was a well-known consultant in the public transport space. He sadly passed away a week ago. So condolences go out to his family. And we miss Paul Browning. For many years, he's been part of us. Easy Clear, software solution for customs clearing, freight forwarding, and logistic providers covering air, sea, road, and rail. Thank you very much, Easy Clear. Wynyard Capital, bespoke taxi industry insights, people you need to talk to. You want to know, understand better the integrated public transport network, as well as especially the taxi industry. So there we go. Those are our associates and our sponsors. And let's give them all a big hand for supporting the Transport Forum and making this possible. We really appreciate your support. I'd like to remind you of the business directory of the Transport Forum. This business directory is very popular. It's well categorized. It's only 450 rands a year to have your organization listed in this business directory. As one of our BE initiatives, we outsourced it to Olga Mashilo, Berlin Bondley Consultant. There's a number, and why maybe take a picture of the screen. But also after this event, you will also receive an email, and with the feedback, you will have opportunity to say whether you want Olga to contact you to get your company listed, or you can give her a call, and she will make sure that your company gets listed on the business directory. So the presentations you see today, they uploaded to the Transport Forum's website. It's actually already been uploaded, and you can download it from there. Just a quick recap: you need to log in on the website of the Transport Forum. So the username and password, you do not have a username and password yet. You click on sign up, and the sign option will give you opportunity to create your own complimentary account. Once you've done that, you go to events and select downloads. Once you've done selected downloads, you can search for whatever you need. And remember, this is now for 15 years worth of presentations, more than 900 presentations. It's a very powerful knowledge base. So you can type in there the title or the description of logistics or a person's surname, and you need search. It will search through all 15 years of presentations, or you can go to the category and select today's date, for example, and you search, and you get the presentations which you can download complimentary, thanks to our sponsors. So there we go, ladies and gents. This is now the time that we're going to ask our 3 questions and see how well you have listened to our questions. The only rule we have is that Should you be an employee of the related company, then you're kindly not allowed to answer the question. You can also only do this for local people. We courier the prizes to the winners. So what you can do now is you can have a look at the bottom of your screen. There's a chat room. And this chat room you can now use to answer your questions. So the first person who answers the question correctly will be then the winner of the prize. And we're going to have 3 winners. So the first question, here goes. Which organization, and I need the acronym, which organization is the representative body and voice of the Express Delivery Institute in South Africa? It's an association and lines. There we go, Janice. Congratulations, Janice, for taking that one. Let's make a note here. Well done, Janice. All right, let's try the next question then. Which organization fulfills the needs of the express cargo industry for daytime and overnight cargo capacity across a comprehensive southern and East Africa footprint? But cargo, there we go, just seen. Congratulations. You got that one right. And then the last question, the last prize. Which organization, and it's also an association and lines with the Transport Forum, they've got the slogan, without trucks, South Africa stops. There we go, Willem van Zyl. Congratulations, Willem van Zyl. Right, congratulations to our winners. This was great fun. Thank you very much, guys. And your prizes will be couriered to you. We'll contact you to obtain the delivery address and so on. So without further ado then, I would like to hand you over to our hosts for the day, Bidvest Cargo. And we've got Muriel Saad, and she's the marketing executive of Bidvest Cargo, and she's going to do the formal welcome for us. Thank you very much, Muriel. We'll just remember to unmute.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome thank you for joining the session. I also want to welcome our guest speakers who we thought could add value, add some insight and words of wisdom in terms of the role that air cargo has been playing and is increasingly playing in the logistics chain. And when I started thinking about the welcome and what are we going to say, I actually looked back at the presentation we did last year with regards to focusing on the domestic air cargo and actually how we realized and the world realized the importance of air cargo and in fact the flexibility in terms of air cargo and how we played a huge role in keeping the economies going, not just in South Africa, but on a worldwide basis. I also looked in at quite a few of the takeaways that we had in that presentation in terms of predictions by AHATA, the World Bank, the fears that we had, and then also what we said is going to make us stronger going forward. And maybe if I can share just some of those before we introduce the speakers and learn from them in terms of their experiences and their plans going forward in terms of air cargo and the role that we play. So when I looked at the presentation last year, we had expectations or fears of our oil price hitting $65 a barrel, obviously impacting Jet A1 fuel on a worldwide basis. Never did we know that we would reach a 52-week high of $130 due to the war by Russia on Ukraine. We expected and everybody predicted a recovery after COVID, when we were still as South Africa preparing going into wave 3. We predicted growth, economic growth, huge growth in terms of air cargo, and hoping that air capacity will improve. Never did we know that while we sit now in July, the fears worldwide of an economic recession. Also, we expected that passenger flight capacity will hopefully return to normal, which will also assist on adding cargo capacity. Not just in South Africa, we all experienced then the unfortunate application by Comair Kalula for liquidation. That in terms of number of flights and seats in the domestic market in South Africa reduced the capacity by 40%. That obviously huge impact on the cargo capacity in terms of the belly freight that we experienced, putting a huge strain in terms of us being able to supply sufficient capacity in the express cargo market. So I think with all of those things and looking back a year, and now hopefully looking back a year in advance, is we as a small, I call it a small, but a major player in the domestic cargo market in South Africa, realizing the role that we played and will continue to play in the logistics chain, just means that we need to find ways to work smarter, to work closer with the other modes of travel in South Africa and on an international basis, and how we can continue to add value. And that for us, that is the reason for the theme of this session, is to see how people can work together, can continue to collaborate. And I think one of the other key takeaways that I have to add, looking at possibly all the negatives that we are experiencing currently, is the resilience, and how are we going to continue adding value in the logistics chain, which is already very, very constrained. Looking at road, we have our road infrastructure deteriorating, where we continuously experiencing strikes, where fuel not only affecting air cargo, but fuel playing a huge role, and the price of fuel and diesel on the costs of road, where our ports are currently under huge constraint because of, again, a worldwide impact on sea freight, where ports in South Africa constrained because of the unfortunate events that we've experienced in Natal. Not only the riots last year, but also the excess weather patterns that we're currently experiencing with all the floods. So in terms of all of those things, I think we as airlines and a domestic airline in South Africa can play a huge role in assisting and in relieving the pressures on certain of the transport modes that in the logistics chain. And hence our guest speakers that we've invited, thank you for your time. We know we are all busy, and it's a very busy time of the year for us. But we would like to learn from you in terms of your experiences and your insights in terms of the value chain. So I would like to thank you, Sharon from DSV, as an airport, as an air freight manager. George Wood, Director of the Customer Operations Group in DHL, your experiences on how things have changed and going forward in your sector and as an industry leader. And then also Dr. Juanita Maria, in terms of your analysis of the air freight value chain from a freight forwarder perspective. We look forward to your input, learning from you, and hopefully to see how we can all work together to make this industry adding value in the value chain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muriel. Definitely with birthday cargo around, I'm quite sure that we will be able to make it work. Thank you very much for hosting us today. And I'm just trying to stop the screen sharing. Apologies. You need this to screen, stop screen sharing. Somebody in Zoom is not allowing me. No. A second, ladies and gents. There we go. All right, ladies and gents, exciting day today. So we're going to have our first presenter for this morning, Ms. Sharon Mole. She's the Johannesburg Air Freight Manager then from DSV Global Transport and Logistics. And she's going to talk about the global air freight market update. Thank you very much, Sharon.
Thanks so much, Harry. Let me just quickly share my screen. Please let me know when you can see it.
Looking good. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, perfect. Great. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share what we know of the current global air freight market with you today. As Harry mentioned, my name is Sharon Mole, and I'm responsible for the air freight operations at DSV in Johannesburg. I think, as Muriel also mentioned, the resilience is key at this point in time. There's so much going on in the market. And I believe now more than ever, we are finding ourselves in really uncharted waters, really not knowing what tomorrow holds. But what's always inspiring is that as South Africans, I believe we typically find opportunities amongst these challenges, and that's really what sets us apart. So without further ado, I hope I can share a little bit of knowledge on what we've gone through in the global air freight markets in general from a DSV perspective. So just for some context in terms of what we'll cover this morning, a brief overview really of what we know is going on globally and how this and the COVID statuses globally are continuing to impact the supply chains worldwide. a current global air freight capacity update, and obviously a big topic that we're all familiar with right now, the jet fuel price. And then just in closing, what we believe we will see from here and where we are heading and sort of where to from here. So those are just some of the topics I'd like to cover with you today. So without further ado, I'll jump straight in. And from a global perspective, I think some of the things that we have seen really impact the global supply chain market was the truck strike in Korea. So in the beginning of June, on the 6th of June, there were strikes over soaring fuel prices and a demand for minimum pay. The union stopped striking on the 14th of June, and they stopped the walkout when they came to an agreement with the government over the freight rate system. But in general, when we look at the impact that this has had from a supply perspective, a manufacturing perspective, and just generally how this impacts the global supply chain. I mean, we saw the likes of Hyundai Motor Company, which manufactures 6,000 vehicles daily down to 1,000 vehicles daily, losing up to $100 million a day. The steelmaker POSCO halted 2 plants during the strikes, losing about 35,000 tons a day. And this rolled over into other industries. I think we're all aware of the chip shortage at the moment, and one of two of the largest memory chip makers was completely halted during this strike in Korea as well. So the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said that the 6 days of strike estimated to about $1.2 billion of damages. And again, another major disruption in the supply chain impacting global markets. Another update, and Muriel also alluded to this, is, as we all know, the Russian-Ukraine war. And Europe has recently imposed the 6th package of sanctions, and this will truly impact the Russian economy extremely negatively. It creates restrictions on the operations in overall in terms of inbound and outbound logistics from a Russian perspective. They are banned in terms of exporting oil, petroleum products, technology goods, high revenue items such as alcohol. And it continues to divert supplies and places pressures on alternative supplier routes, which again then impacts the global supply chain market and how that impacts the world essentially, and where cargo is routed from and supplied from. As I say, this naturally places constraints on certain supply chains, contributing to further capacity challenges. And this also contributed by the Russian carriers, which a lot of the area or majority of the world is really embargoed on, as well as the Russian airspace that's removed from the market. And we'll see that a little bit later in my presentation as well. This is an interesting slide, which I decided to put in, and I know it's specifically related to some of the retailers and basically chain stores in America. But I think what's key and what's depicted on this slide is that this is really rolling over to a lot of other industries and going to start affecting the world at large. So what we see here is how the impact of supply chain delays are impacting overstocking for large chain stores. And this really impacts the American retailers because the seasonal stock reaches the consumer too late. And then the goods become obsolete and past its ideal selling window. So you can imagine if there's a container or a flight delay into America that's meant for the summer season, and those delays roll over into your autumn season, those goods are now obsolete. And they can't necessarily keep that stock either for next year because it's going to basically, it's going to be obsolete and it's no longer in its ideal selling window. So we believe that this will drive a very different picture relating to forecasting, planning, and as I say, we do feel that this will really roll into various other industries and impact not only the American market, but this is something that we'll see more of globally and how the supply chain delays are having a devastating impact on businesses as well. So I realize we are all possibly undergoing COVID fatigue, and we're quite sick of hearing about the impact of COVID. But yeah, and I think most of us would ultimately like to start moving back to our new normal. However, we unfortunately cannot deny the impact of COVID globally and what this still holds in terms of supply and demand and the supply chain as a whole. So with the Shanghai lockdown being imposed at the beginning of June, we once again saw major disruption within the supply chain and the global market. Various large manufacturers and suppliers were halted. What's interesting, however, from where we're sitting and what we forecasted was that the retailers and the OEMs had full order books going into this COVID shutdown. And the expectation was that we would see a major influx of exports of cargo once the lockdown ended. And interestingly, this just hasn't really materialized to the point that we expected it to. We expected the production spike and export drive, once they reopened a few weeks ago. But I think, again, this just talks to what an unpredictable market we're in at the moment, and that it's not always possible to foresee what's going to happen in the supply chain and global market at this point. I've added this slide just as an interesting point, basically to see where we are in general from a Shanghai or China perspective. So I think from a general perspective, North China is really resuming resuming work as normal. Majority of the staff are back in offices, and it's sort of switching on the economy in general. Air freight, all the airports and the terminals and airlines are operating as normal, the customs officials, the custom officers, and similarly with the ports starting to slowly switch on. The massive delays from an ocean freight congestion has really spilled over into the air freight space. And what we foresee from a global market perspective is that this will probably continue for most likely the next 2 years, that the world will really rely on air freight specifically because the ocean products are so congested. And that's what we believe would be a potential reality. I've added this just as a sort of a summary from an Asia perspective, because I thought it was quite interesting to see how the Asian market and different countries are approaching the COVID situation quite differently. I know that recently, for some of you that have followed the news, there's also been quite a bit of a spike in the Shanghai cases again. I mean, with their very sort of strict zero COVID tolerance approach, we don't know whether there's a looming shutdown again happening, because it spiked from about 50 cases a day to 750 cases again. So I guess we need to watch the space and see what's happening. But for the moment, China is still banning restaurant dining. Singapore, if you are vaccinated, you can enjoy quarantine-free travel, no social distancing, no limits to social gathering. So we see a completely different approach from a Singapore perspective. Malaysia, if you're vaccinated as a traveler, you don't need to be tested. Masks are optional outdoors. And the likes of a Thailand, we see the nightclubs and karaoke bars resuming normal, regular hours. So, I mean, really almost back to normal from a Thailand perspective. So Asia in general, just taking a very sort of different approach per country in terms of their stance on COVID. Now to go into the global air freight updates, and I'll jump straight in. So what we've seen from a global perspective, from an air freight point of view, is really that there's a 5% capacity reduction in respect to 2019, which is your pre-COVID levels, compared to where we are currently. So that means we've got 5% less capacity space, aircraft space, basically, to service the market. And what's very interesting is how we see a complete switch just in terms of the capacity or the carriers that are being used. So pre-COVID, the strategy with majority of the carriers was to use less freighters. And then we obviously saw COVID hit, and we saw no passengers were traveling globally whatsoever. So we had to, or the carriers and the markets had to completely switch around, and they had to start relying on freighters. So a lot of the Middle Eastern carriers, for example, also started a very aggressive approach to convert their passenger flights to freighters, and we call these passenger freighters. So a full conversion was done on these passenger flights, taking out seats and basically making this passenger flight and converting it into a freighter. Freighters had to pick up the slack essentially during COVID due to the limited passenger flights. We don't always, I guess, think about this, but a lot of our cargo is flown with passenger flights. And so when passengers stop flying, you're pulling so much capacity out of the market. And hence we're seeing here how the airline freighters had to pick up the slack and really increased by 19% from pre-COVID levels. Passenger belly, so your passenger flights down by 34%, and then your integrator freighters up by 40%. So a very interesting picture. What the little map also depicts is just some of the routes and how that has impacted. So you'll see that there was a significant rerouting of the Asia to Europe cargo via the Middle East. And I guess some of that we can also contribute to the Russian-Ukraine war at this stage. What is, however, I think a concern for the market in general at this point, and specifically something that we are worried about, is that a lot of the freighters that are currently carrying a lot of the capacity in the market is to soon be decommissioned. So they're almost at the end of their lifespan. And I mean, to order a new freighter, the ordering process is approximately 5 years from order date to receiving a new freighter. We also see that a lot of the carriers aren't really wanting to take the gamble of what the demand yields are going to be a year from now. We don't really know what's expected. So this creates a very real risk that there could be a shortage of freighters in the very near future. So again, just to the previous slide, wide body capacity is far from pre-COVID levels. And again, to the point of how much we are currently relying on the freighters to manage to basically manage the capacity at this point. So interestingly, how we see the intra-Asia minus 43% that we've seen down on passenger travel essentially, or belly capacity. So that's really within your Asian route. Transatlantic, interestingly, we see the lowest reduction of 9%. So that's your route between Europe and the USA. And it seems to have still continued with quite a bit of wide body capacity on that route. The largest reduction, Asia Pacific to Europe at 49%. And then your Trans-Pacific being between the US and South America into Asia and Australasia. And I think again, talking to the previous slide and relating to COVID on some of the earlier slides as well, the market continues to remain extremely unpredictable. And many carriers will possibly manage their upcoming order strategy with a very risk-averse approach. As I mentioned, this could really put us in a predicament in the near future because we are heavily dependent on freighters in the market at the moment. And if these become unavailable, it's going to be placing a massive capacity constraint on the global supply chain market, especially from an air freight perspective. I think we're all aware of the dreaded fuel price at the moment and the impact that this is having on us one way or another. There's a shortage globally on oil distillates, and in many parts of the world, it's quite difficult to find jet fuel. In Africa, some of our supplies were coming from Russia. So you can imagine what a massive impact this has on us as a country or as a continent. In the USA, there's a shortage of jet fuel from the refineries, and they're also having issues to get fuel from Europe. So in general, inventories of jet fuel at the airports are extremely low, and what we can see is that the jet fuel has increased during the year at a faster speed than the price of crude oil. And this obviously has a direct impact on air freight costs, and we can expect more volatility even with the coming summer flight schedules. And it's interesting from a market perspective, a lot of our clients and people in the market keep questioning us and asking, when are rates going to normalize and hopefully go back to pre-COVID levels? And I think at this point, without trying to be pessimistic, our sentiment really is that we don't believe that it will ever return to normal, or at least pre-COVID levels. And a reason for this, we also believe, is that a lot of the carriers are wanting to make up their previously lost yields. So those profits that they essentially lost during COVID. The demand continues to push up the rates as well. And even when the demand starts slacking a little bit, and we hope that the rates will soften, then you've got the other elements of the jet fuel price that again pushes up the price. So ultimately, we don't believe that there will be any relief on any kind of rate at this point in time. I've included a little bit of a summary, just in general from a global point of view in terms of what we're seeing with rates and space, and really how that's impacted globally from an air freight perspective. So from China and Hong Kong, and we believe that this is also just post-lockdown and obviously coming out of their long holidays, that the rates in the space has slightly decreased. Similarly with South Asia, we see rates have gone down. Space is fairly on the rise, but continuing to pick up. Interesting, exports from India and Bangladesh, the demand remains soft, but capacity is waiting to recover. So again, we see that the rates are kind of stable at this point, not reducing, and similar with the space as well. Exports from Europe, definitely reduced in demand. The high-end fashion is showing higher demand due to the season change. And I think we'll start seeing an increase now as well once everybody returns from their summer holidays in Europe and start switching on that demand as well. And then from North America, the demand remains high, especially into Europe. And again, rates slightly softening. But because of that jet fuel price, we are still seeing sky-high rates pre-COVID levels. And then I think, just really in closing, what are we foreseeing and what are we doing at this point? So I think a lot of the larger logistics and freight forwarders are really trying to look at the market quite differently. So for an example, what we've done, which was never really our approach and wasn't something we did pre-COVID levels, is we had to become a lot smarter in our consolidation strategy. And we routed a lot of specific freighters and sort of charter solutions into strategic areas in Europe and the US to make sure that we are trying with some kind of or we stabilizing it some kind of way, the rates, and providing that capacity that we've really seen has been chunked out of the market since COVID really hit. So I think the demand continues to remain on the macro economy and the consumer confidence. And Muriel also mentioned we are really sort of heading into a global recession. So that will continue to put pressure on the supply chain globally. Interest rates, inflation, GDP, etc. We are going to unfortunately see continued service disruptions from COVID-19 lockdowns. As I mentioned earlier, the numbers spiking again in China. We don't know if there's a lockdown looming. And yeah, that every time that lockdown happens, it's got a massive impact from a manufacturing, a supplier perspective, global supply chain, etc. And that ocean freight crisis also rolling into the markets. And that's what you can also see here on the graph, just in April 2021, what happened in the Suez Canal from an ocean perspective and how that rolled over. Capacity impact from Russia and the Ukraine crisis, how that impacts our jet fuel prices, the supply having to be sort of picked up by the rest of the globe, and that continues to put massive constraints on various other routes. And belly space capacity being missing on trade lanes to and from Asia, but also globally in the rest of the world, and how that continues to impact our capacity and our options and drives up the rates. And then, as I said, sadly, rates are likely to remain elevated versus pre-pandemic levels, just because those carriers are continuing to want to recover some of their yields and because of the other factors. And then I will just leave you with this, that the line between disorder and order lies in logistics. I think we've all felt that became true during COVID as well, and we realized what an important part we all play. But thank you so much for your time and for allowing me to share some of our insights with you today.
Thank you so much, Sharon. This was seriously interesting and comprehensive. Yeah, looking at, I made a few notes, and it's frightening to think about the lockdown still looming as well, the possibility of that. I saw South African TV this morning. Also, they were discussing, another wave again potentially, and I'd rather switch the TV off. But anyway, so, and the demand goes up and the fuel price goes up, and no relief on rate for seeing. But thank you very much. Let me not waste your time.
Thanks, Harry.
This time, I'm quite sure they're looking forward to talking to you in the questions and answer session. Thanks. Thank you so much for your preparation. We really appreciate it. Ladies and gents, our next presenter then is Mr. George Wood. He's the Director, Customs Operations Group, SSA, at DHL, and he's going to talk to us about the operational impact of COVID-19 and the DHL Express response. Thank you very much, George.
Thanks, Harry. Fantastic insight from Sharon there, and I'm just going to go from a courier perspective. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We can see your screen. Yes, perfect. It just sounds a little bit bandwidth. Let's talk and see how it goes. Thank you, George.
Okay, thanks, Harry. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name's George Wood. I'm Director of Customs Operations Group for Sub-Saharan Africa with DHL Express. Today, we're going to talk about the operational impact of COVID-19 and DHL Express's response within the SSA region. So I've broken it up into three. First of all, we're going to have a look at the impact of COVID-19, what I've called Welcome to the Flatline, and we'll get to that. COVID-19, the DHL Express Sub-Saharan Africa response, and that's under Keeping Africa Connected. And then the current commercial aviation landscape, and that's just really adding on to what my the previous presenter has just been through. So let's get straight into it because I'm a little wizzy of time. COVID-19 obviously had a catastrophic global impact, but the impact was really felt in Sub-Saharan Africa. Why was that? Well, we rely on commercial passenger aircraft, especially from a courier perspective. We rely on those belly hold capacity rather than freighter aircraft. Yes, it was a very, very dynamic time, and we saw airlines actually repurposing their passenger airframes to carry cargo. We all saw on the news. We all saw, you know, 777s, cargo on seats, etc. And airlines like KLM, they became actually very good at repurposing, and they actually kept South Africa connected to the rest of the world, and they're still there. They've started their schedules are nearly back to pre-COVID levels, although they're still building that capacity. We saw the industry shift to cargo flight schedules, which had an impact on transit times for courier volumes, and we were seeing a lot of backlogs at many of our hubs and gateway facilities, and that was globally. It just changed the entire way that the global cargo industry worked. It was totally unprecedented. Now, if we have a look, IATA, who are the International Air Transport Association, they're predicting global passenger traffic, so revenue passenger kilometers, or RPKs, are not going to return to pre-COVID levels until 2024, a year later than previously projected. So they were saying 2023. I actually think we might get there. Looking at the data, I think we're going to get there before. Hopefully we're going to get there before, but they still reckon it's going to be 2024. And I was just checking with them last week. So we talked about the flat line. This was how we termed it in South Africa. If you have a look at that, graph, you'll see why. We have a cliff. Yeah, so we had a fall in daily flight departures of 98%. It just dived it was literally 0 or 1 aircraft departure a day, and it stayed like that for almost 7 months. And it was just cargo charters. We had cargo charters. I'm going to come on to that because we needed to keep Southern Cone of Africa connected to the global supply chain. Why? Well, we need to get vaccines in. We need to get medical or essential cargo in. Yeah, so it was really a very dynamic and very challenging 7 months at that beginning of the second quarter, third quarter of 2020. So what did we do? Okay, so end of March 2020, the business decided to stand up what we called the Joint Operations Centre, or the JOC. It was led by myself and my colleague, Mr. Jason Blackman, who is a regular on these webinars. It still goes today. We're still stood up. We're still monitoring all 51 SSA countries, and we're reacting to anything COVID can throw at us. We became the single source of truth. So it was our job to look at all the government regulations, every country in those 51 having different regulations, different responses to COVID-19. And we had to work out how to navigate and keep the business going, keep our customers serviced and connected to the rest of the world. And it was very challenging, I can tell you, but we learned so much. And I think the business is a lot better for it. They say every cloud has a silver lining. Well, I think from a DHL Express, we've certainly learned a lot from it. So one of the major successes for DHL Express was building a bridge to the world. So in response to South African borders being closed and the lack of commercial packs, belly space, we worked with DHL South Africa and DHL Aviation, and we created an air bridge connecting South Africa to the Middle East, that being Bahrain. We routed via Nairobi in Kenya and then on to Bahrain, which acted as a hub, and that allowed us to connect with the global network. Now, this service operated 5 times a week, 3 times a week via Zambia, and we used chartered Boeing 727 and 767 freighters. It's been so successful, it remains in place to this day and ensures both outbound and inbound capacity to our customer base in both Eastern and Southern Cone countries. Okay, so what we've done is we've actually protected ourselves, or we rely less now on the passenger flights. You know, we have that cushion now, and we have this other option. Although there's still maybe a day transit time added, it does give us that capacity and gives us that guarantee that we're going to get material out. Also, DHL Express were the only express company that has a fleet of its own aircraft in Africa. And I think what COVID taught us was that we could use that fleet to great effect to keep our customers connected with the rest of the globe. We leveraged all our transport assets via JOC, Mammoth Task, and we managed to achieve, even though there was longer transit times, we achieved 94.8% on-time performance in 2020, which was absolutely unbelievable. Our ability to deploy our aircraft fleet as required helped us maximize our impact, and the DHL hybrid model paid dividends and ensure we kept our promise to our customers. Indeed, hybrid air transport models became pivotal. CAL, commercial airlines versus own network, became crucial as part of contingency planning and responses. We were very agile. We made ourselves agile, and we're able to dodge what COVID was throwing at us. Protecting our staff and customers. When COVID hit, immediate remote working was initiated. Everyone got VPNs and everyone was allowed to work from home. We're just coming into the office now, going back to pre-COVID styles of working. However, I think it's going to be a little bit of maybe a hybrid type of working. Personal protection gear, that was rolled out across the region. And really, it helped us develop our health and safety awareness across all staff. There's certainly a lot more. Communication from a health and safety perspective across the entire business in SSA. We were one of the first companies in Africa to provide contactless proof of delivery. Again, you know, every cloud has a silver lining. We were using COVID-19 to, you know, speed up delivery of new technology, etc. And we were able to expand our on-demand service, or ODD service, to 41 countries across the region. And during COVID, our couriers haven't asked customers to physically sign for their packages, and by doing so, have been playing their part in contactless risk mitigation. I'm going to go on because I'm very concerned about time and really get to the crux of the matter, the road to recovery. Okay, so where are we? Demand, the demand has softened slightly, down 5% year on year versus last year. We're going to see e-commerce contribution to global air volumes likely to increase in the coming months, and then we'll see that as we go into the busy period, which is November, December, obviously with the Christmas period. Capacity, and I've just highlighted the red, those are specifically for the courier, the courier business. We've seen PAX capacity down nearly 22% in June 22 versus June 19. and jet fuel prices touched $172 a barrel in June 22. So concern there. I just took this. This is the TAC rates global trend, and you'll see there. Yep. My colleague before, she was touching on it as well. Yeah, it is still, rates remain high, and I don't think we're going to see any drop to pre-COVID levels for a very long time. Okay, so where are we now? I send out this report to all my country managers and country ops managers on a monthly basis, and I keep abreast with the ICAO website on COVID daily departures, aircraft departures. So pre-COVID departures on a global view, we were looking at about 28,715 departures daily globally. We are now at 23,788. So we're about 83% of pre-COVID levels. Now, if we drill down into sub-Saharan Africa, so here we see West and Central Africa, they've actually survived the storm quite well. Pre-COVID, it was 177 daily departures, and we're back up to about 160 daily departures, which is 90% of pre-COVID levels. So they're doing very well, and they've weathered the storm very well. East and Southern, 401 daily departures. Where are we now? 296 daily departures. That's 74%, so a little lower than West. And South Africa is a contributor to that. And there we go. We've got the South African view. Pre-COVID, we were about 110 daily departures. We're currently on 65, 59% of where we are, because a lot of people say, well, COVID's over. No, it's not. Far from it. We're in what we call now the COVID babalas. There's still not enough tin in the air to shift the cargo volume. Kenya, 54 daily departures pre-COVID, current 40 there. And Nigeria, 32 pre-COVID daily departures. We're up to 27, so really doing well in Nigeria, and that's back to 84% of pre-COVID departures. And there, thank you.
George, thank you so much. That was also very interesting. I like the COVID babalas expression.
It's true. It's true, Harry. It is not over. Far from over from a global cargo perspective. Yeah. We've got a long way to go still. We're there. We've really seen our transit times plateau. So we've got to a stage where we're almost there. We just need a single piece of that puzzle put back in to get to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah. At least
hopefully next year.
Yeah, but at least you guys are now better geared, to handle the situation than pre-COVID. So that obviously making a huge difference, I believe. Thank you very much, George. It's so interesting to hear about the challenge in keeping your customers connected across the globe. That is an interesting one. I never thought it that way. But George, now thank you. Hopefully you're available with the questions and answer session. Thank you so much. Ladies and gents, our next presenter then is Dr. Unita Marius. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. And she's going to talk to us about the air freight value chain from a freight forwarder perspective. Thank you very much, Unita.
Thank you, Harry. Will you allow me to share my screen? Yes, and press in presentation mode. Let's just quickly go up. And I just want to bring in my pointer. Okay. I hope you can see my screen and my pointer. Is that fine? Can I go?
All good. Thank you, Yumita.
Okay, thank you, Harry, and thank you for the colleagues. I must say I enjoy Sharon and George, and I think it will fit in quite nicely with my presentation as well. And special thank you to SIEPA, Gary Marshall, for inviting us. So normally what we look at, and that's normally the idea when you look at the supply chain, people will say you have an exporter, domestic transport, a border, then you get to the intercontinental, which we know now, the sea freight, the air freight. And the air freight was predominantly, they move high value cargo per unit, time sensitivity, and the just in time. And then you will have the border in destination country, domestic, and ultimately the buyer, or let's say the hub. But in COVID and prior to COVID, we were seeing that that's not true. We've got a very complex logistics network. It's got an infrastructure which consists out of a terminal, the hubs, the aircrafts, the crew, and then also the evacuation system. You've got a legal framework, which George touched on during COVID. We could see the misalignment in the legal framework. You've got the demands of the supplier and the consignee, and China has shown us dearly what is it happen when the supply chains are being stopped or production is not being done. And then the service providers, which is where we play in very much with the airlines. We are one of the role players in the extended supply chain. And then in the middle, we've got a logistics system. And I think what COVID has shown us over the last 2 years is that a logistics system, it's a jewel, and we need to keep that jewel, and we need to nourish it and make sure it's growing, because if it doesn't grow, it's going backwards. So in that is that sometimes we try with our government and all over when we engage, we making the point clear that it's a shared infrastructure. And with the shared infrastructure comes shared responsibility. And that makes sure that we connect trade with the logistics. Because if we don't do that, the ultimate thing is the cost, the time, and we actually cannot do a reliability in the service delivery. If we don't do a reliability in the service delivery, we cannot do the trade growth. And then underpin with that, you normally have your upstream logistics, logistic at rest, and your downstream logistics. So that's for us what we can see from the Freight Forwarding Association, that it becomes our focus very much to say that how do we keep the shared infrastructure intact and we help trade to grow. Now that gives us to the next thing, is that the characteristics of air freight is very important in the whole logistic network, because we depict the different modes here. You can see the road, the road train, the rail, the sea, and the pipeline. But we can see the air freight, and if you look at what Gerard de Villiers and Schoeman have done, they portrayed for us in a way that we say, how do we link the load with the distance and with the speed? And you can see where air freight is playing the role. They are quick to the market. They do carry a load, but yes, there is some in that they have a limited load capacity. And I think Sharon addressed that very much also in that in COVID, we have now a very diminishing capacity, and how the configuration of the air freight was doing. But more important is, if we look and see why is this modality very important, you can see it's a high consistency. Yes, it is a limitation, it's high costly, but it is there to move important or urgent shipments. And very much the economic characteristics is high cost, yes, but it moves terminal to terminal, and there's no disruption in the terminal to terminal, and it's predominantly moving high value cargo. And that's what we found in the pharmaceuticals, the fresh produce, and we have racehorses all around the world, that is what they're doing. So you can see the importance in the modality shift and the key characteristics. Then when we look further, is that when we look at the benefits of air freight, that's important, but then we go to the right-hand side, and you can see 35% of global trade in value is moved by this modality. Yes, it might be 1% in volume, but if you look at the value, it's tremendously high. And in a 24 cycle, which is much more important, 100,000 airplanes take off, 20 million packages are moved, and over 200 race horses, and it's 18.6 billion in value that's been shipped in a 24-hour cycle. And also what we learn in COVID is that it connects landlocked countries. Because when the lockdown was coming, lockdown level 5, 4, we could see that, as we refer in the South African Association of Freight Forwarders, is not landlocked country, but land-linked country. It was the air modality that keep them together with the road modality intact. Then we far from recovery because we can see the losses, and that's also what Sharon was talking to. We can see the massive losses that's been coming in the air freight modality. And it's not the same as in the sea freight modality, but there's going to be a long road to recovery. In that, what we do on a weekly basis, we produce the report on the BUSA, which is the Apex Voice in Business. And you can see when you compare our statistics, domestic air cargo, international air cargo, compared to last year, we're 82%. There was a slight recovery, and international cargo, 96%. Then bring it more home. If we look at when we are the levels in 2019, you can see here with my cursor, that was the level. And if we predict it, we're now here. So we're slowly picking up to recovery, but we're not on the levels prior to COVID-19. And that's mainly because maybe we don't want to say it, but our trade growth is not there where it's supposed to be. Now, what's for us more concerning in the freight forwarding industry is the balance, because we need to have a balance between the inflow and the outflow of cargo. And we're very encouraging by the DTIC that they want to develop the SEZs, because we believe if the SEZs are closer to the main airports, it will help us to serve in that industry. And then hopefully we can wipe out this imbalance between the inflow and the outflow of cargo. Because we all know that the inflow and the outflow of cargo is very important to help us also to keep the prices sustainable. I just show you also the South African figures. You can see we've got a slowly uptake. So it's not where it should be, but at least there's a silver line that we are busy recovering. It's coming to a slow, but we are busy recovering. Then if I bring it more home to what keeps us awake at night, it's definitely our security in our terminals currently. And the security here is to do with the cargo. If the cargo arrives in the terminal, does it arrive intact? Can we get it quickly? And if there is any damages, how can we claim for the damages? Because if I link back to the value of the cargo, you can see that 35% of the world trade moves in value. And currently, if there's a claim that a lost parcel, you will only get about $20 per kilogram. And we're not working in air freight, it's not a kilogram, it's the rand value. So that is for us a very concerning trend that we're picking up at our terminals. And we want to take with government hands in a shared facility to make sure how can we make or focus on the importance of this modality and bring back a secure environment for the operators in the terminals and with the evacuation of the cargo. Then what's the lessons that we've learned? And I'll summarize that for us is that I don't want to talk about the capacity shrink that Sharon was touching us. It was for us much more the staff availability. And then also it was the operational risk that COVID was bringing. And that is very much important, is that how do we keep this modality intact? And how do we make sure that this modality can unlock the demonstrated capacity for our trade growth in sensitive cargo? Now, onto that is that we can see IATA was saying that for them, the most important thing is to keep this sustainability, to modernize, and to make sure it's a safe modality. We take it further to say that how do we bring it back to the lessons that we learn? And my next slide will talk to what do we think is going to be the solutions to make sure this modality can play its role that it does, is that supply chains are not designed to handle any disruptions. I think there's a lot of people and articles that's been written around the world to say that supply chains were never designed to handle disruptions. And when it is disruptions on a continually basis, the resilience become now a bit of a challenge because we don't bounce back quick enough. And also what we can see in the air modality, it's very important to connect us to overseas markets. That forces now to look new with new innovative ideas, how we can bring back the resilience in the air modality. So what we have done, we categorize it in 4 different pillars, and that's very much aligned. We need to do the digitalization, and that calls on partnership between government and private sector. And also what we can see with our working in the last 2 months, it's just not private sector with public sector, but it's also public sector amongst themselves. I think that's a concept that we in South Africa need to say, that we need to mature on that level, and we need to have robust discussions with each other on how can we partner, because that's something that we have not yet matured in the South African environment with a good partnership. Then effectively, how do we handle the risk mitigations? And that we know now the South African Revenue Services took up the program from the WCO, which is a safe framework under pillar 2, and we will do now the safety or the compliance, safety and security. And they opened about 2 months ago for the operators in the extended supply chain to participate in this program. So that allows now the terminal, the customs broker, the freight forwarder, the transporter to participate in this program, and then we will get some certain benefits. Innovation, I think that's what George touched on as well. We could see with the DHL business case that it forces business to look now at different business models and ownership. And that's probably a combination between a hybrid or some other models as well. Interesting, Sharon touched on that. It's the consolidation that allow now industry to re-look, reroute and see where consolidations can be built. And also at the back of our mind, we need to work towards the commitment in year 2050 to be green and to decarbonize the supply chain. Now, what is our analysis? How do we see it from a freight forwarding perspective? I think we try to analyze and see what do we see now? What do we think over 28 years? What will happen? So our first thing that we can see now, it's the e-airway bill for the medium and the small companies that's coming into play. And also very importantly is the Africa Free Continental Trade Area that opened up now a protocol for trade and services. Unfortunately, we don't have yet in South Africa under the DTIC policy on the trade and services, but we think that's going to come because that's very much where the logistics industry and the air freight are playing. Then if I move, we definitely will see a very strong digitalization between, as I said, private sector and government and amongst government. Then ultimately, if we look at it, we will come to a situation where we will have definitely more drone deliveries. E-commerce will mature in different forms. We don't know yet. We probably think it will be a touch on the immersive technology and maybe some different models on the e-commerce. So if I go to the next one, we will probably would see that there's a next phase of the e-commerce that will come, and definitely a direct link between customer and business. And ultimately, the immersive technology, which will create for us a virtual reality. And that will be from different tools, training, offsite monitoring, and also what we can see now, virtual warehousing as well and planning. So that's what we will see to make sure that we keep this modality intact. And then the key messages, that's my second last slide. I think we understand and we see now from COVID, and we're working with the air modality, is that the supply chain is definitely a complex structure. We need to keep it intact. We need to dialogue much more, and we need to help each other. And most important, it's a shared infrastructure concept. And my slide that I will show, the imbalance factoring or the balance factoring, that's for us as freight forwarders very important. That's why we want to help DTIC to develop the SEZ, although we're not in the SEZ manufacturing, but we can facilitate the trade. And more importantly, we know that it's linked to cost, but we need to make sure that we keep this modality intact and we help them to recover from the losses over the last couple of years. And I think for me, I put in this message and I thought a lot before I put the message in. It's for me such a good message because I think that's what we can see in the South African government or in South African society currently, is that we've got a high level of resilience. We have so many challenges, so many hard things that's coming our way, but we have a very good spirit and we always bounce back. So for me, this is probably something that resonates in the air modality, that they have a strong resilience and they're going to bounce back. And it's one of the modalities that we need very much in our logistics network. And Larry, thank you for the opportunity. I hope my message was concise, clear, because we think it's a very important modality in our logistics network. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Junita. And thank you very much for the role you are playing also as a person in terms of fostering collaboration in our South African freight industry, freight and logistics industry, and big work you're doing also to get government to collaborate amongst each other. We really appreciate the important work you're doing. Very interesting talking about the value ratio versus volume and air freight. I never thought about that. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Junita. Right, ladies and gents, what we're going to do now is we're going to have the questions and answer session. So you'll have opportunity to ask questions to our panelists, and we're going to be moderated by Gary Marshall. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Bidvest Cargo. He's also the CEO of SAPA, and we couldn't have had a better person to moderate these questions and answers for us. So if kindly all our panelists can unmute themselves and also switch on the cameras so that I can bring them into the panel, I'll really appreciate that.
Thank you, Harry. I wonder if I could just make a couple of comments on our own experiences to add to what the speakers have said. I think there are a couple of other impacts on air capacity around the world. One, for example, and then I'll explain how it works, was the grounding of the 737 MAX. And so let me give you what that impact is. So it is the latest version of the Boeing 737, which is a very popular freighter aeroplane for short haul routes. So I'm not talking about the kind of thing George was talking about and even Sharon was talking about in terms of intercontinental. There you're talking about wide-bodied jets. When it comes to short haul, you're often using the smaller aircraft, and the Boeing 737 is probably the most well-used airplane. What often happens in the freighter world, particularly on short haul, is that passenger airplanes get to a life where those airplanes become tired, and they then get converted into freighters. They go in for a major conversion. They have the floors are strengthened to take the extra weight. The insides obviously are stripped out and rollers put in, and a big hole is cut in the side of the airplane so you can get the cargo in and out. So we were at a situation pre-COVID and pre-737 MAX being grounded, where the next generation of freighters was going to be the Boeing 800 series, which has flown all around the world. I think it's the largest. There are more 737 800s than any other airplane in the world. So they were getting the first lot of 800s were coming to the end of their lives, and so they were due for conversion into freighters. And the MAX was actually coming in, so you would have the 737 800 passenger airplanes going into be converted into freighters, and they would be replaced by the newer version of the MAX. Well, of course, the MAX's story, you probably know, the airplane was grounded globally due to safety concerns by the FAA and Boeing and every other civil aviation authority. And what that meant was that the Boeing 800 series had to keep flying longer as passenger airplanes than they would normally have done. So they weren't being converted to freighters. So suddenly you found that the influx of freighters was being severely restricted for short-haul runs, domestic runs and short-haul regional runs. And that's still the case today. The MAX has only started to reduce flying. But now, of course, we've all got the situation where all of us in the aviation community are really nervous about the uncertainties of the future, because, I can tell you a year ago was very different to today, and 2 years ago was very different to last year. And so where are going to be a year's time? It's a really, really uncertain environment. And when you're buying airplanes of this size, even the smaller ones, you're talking about hundreds of millions of rand. If you're going to go to wide body stuff, you're talking about billions in rand terms for an airplane. So to commit, and Sharon was talking about sort of 5-year lead time to ordering a freighter. Imagine that you've got to predict 5 years' time, and we can't even predict a month in advance. I mean, who would have said 2 months ago that 40% of our capacity in South Africa, seat capacity, would be taken out? So it's a hellishly uncertain environment that we're all operating in, and making long-term commitments now really, really nervous. I'm always delighted to see companies like DHL, companies like DSV, particularly in the South African environment now, who have made some serious infrastructure commitments to the future. They're very brave, but they are to be commended and lauded for the kind of things that they're doing. And I think also we need to try and find a way to stabilize this industry of ours. So it's a frightening environment, it's an uncertain environment, and there are more impacts than just COVID. As I say, the MAX, the Boeing 800 MAX had a big impact. And then on top of it is the next trend, which Juanita may be able to comment more. And so we're seeing this disruption to the supply chain and caused by global trade lanes being continually impacted by COVID. And if it's not COVID, it's wars and it's all kinds of things. So a lot has been said about almost localization of production. So in other words, instead of ordering from China, why not have a production facility that's in a closer proximity to your market? So in the South African context, should we be gearing up production instead of importing? In the American market, particularly, if you have a look at their imports from China, and most of them are American products, actually, that are you not going to see a change in the location of production and its markets? And that, of course, in 5 years' time, when you now just ordered your several billion rand airplane and suddenly the market lanes have been transformed, to get to Juanita's points about adaptability and so on. So I think there's all of these kind of things making this industry very, very uncertain at the moment. So sorry, I just wanted to add that. My apologies. Right, can I ask any of the participants in this forum if they've got any questions for the panel?
See, Shirley Lloyd and Charles Days put their hands up, Gary. So maybe Shirley Lloyd, you can unmute and ask a question.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask a question, and thank you so much for all the presentations. They have been so interesting and very informative and very important. And now my world of work has been and still remains the world of education, training, skills development, and continuing professional development and all of those good things. So what would the panel say in terms of, if you look at the future of work, what sort of new jobs would they envisage that could emerge? And what sorts of skills or knowledge should be included in either current qualifications or the design of new qualifications? Because at the end of the day, every industry, its greatest resource would be its people and the people who work there. But we need people who are upskilled and multi-skilled to keep up with all of the things that are happening, the trends, where we are going specifically in supply chain, logistics, and all of these things. So that is my question to the panel. Thank you very much, Harry.
We'd like to have a bash at that.
I'll go, Gary.
Thanks, George.
Okay, Shirley, really good question. And what we're seeing now, I think a shift from an IT perspective, IT skills, big data skills. I think that's really, really important, so we can really drill down into the data at a global level. I think that's very important, but also I think customs skills, international trade. Okay, so as a continent, and this actually just follows on from Gary, is why from a courier perspective is one of the questions customers ask me is, George, why don't DHL have aircraft coming into South Africa every day, like the United States, like China, like Europe? Well, it's simple. We are a consumer region. So we have the volumes coming in, but we don't have the volumes coming out. So we need, as a continent, to start really looking in the side and going, okay, what can we do? What can we make? Not just to support our region, but also to export. And then we will get those aircraft coming in, because we're an importer, but we're not an exporter. We need to become an exporter as well. And then that's when we actually go onto the world stage. And I think we can do it. In my lifetime, I think we can do it, especially with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. But we just got to get traction on that. Okay, we've got the political will. We just need people to start understanding how these free trade agreements work and how we can work together as a continent to build productivity, etc., and build our exports. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Maybe, Gary, if I come in here, I'm not sure if I can answer one or two on the notes that you made. Is that if I just come back, you were asking on the stabilization of the environment, and you're quite right. That's what, just to touch on George's point, that's why we need to take hands with the private sector and the public sector to see that if they develop the SEZ and the OR Tambo, that we make sure that it can work and that we advise them on the light industry, because that will help us on a strategic, cohesive approach, that if we do the SEZs, how does it help in the air modality? So I think it's that connection that the government doesn't really fully understand, and that's where the private sector needs to play a role. And you're quite right. I want to second what you were saying with DSV and the DHL that really invest in the South African environment. That's very encouraging, because that's what we need more from the private sector to put the confidence back into our economy. And then if I can come to the skill set, I will agree with the big data, because that's what we can see. The big data will help with the analysis, the predictability, and where do you need to go. But coupled to that, what we can see in all our course material, we failed to train the people how to do critical thinking. And I was searching, and maybe there's some of the colleagues on the line that can help us, but it's not the customs knowledge, it's not the aircraft knowledge, is that how do we bring the skill set of critical thinking into the supply chain? And I think if we can get that sweet spot in South Africa, we're on a winning course. And then the last thing is that we need to get our heads more around the integrated work planning skills. And I know we go into the CETAs and the TETAs, but we as private sector must have a much stronger voice to make sure that we get integrated work skills planning, and that's work for our logistics industry. Because currently all the plans are there, but it doesn't work for our logistics industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Thank you for that, Charles Day.
We have two hands up. Who was first?
Charles Day.
Charlie?
Thanks, Gary. And it follows on directly from what Shirley was talking about, and also a question on the chat room from Sandra Gertenbach. My question goes like this. To what extent is the South African education, training and development system addressing the changing skills needs of the post-COVID air freight environment, which you've all described? And both George and Jonita have identified different skills which we require. But my worry and my concern is that we have a very, very complex education, training, development, CETA system, etc., which is just so bound up in red tape that it just doesn't have the flexibility to meet the kind of skills needs which is dictated to by this very disruptive trade environment, which all three of you have, and Gary as well, have described. Does this CETA system, this complex system of qualification building that takes about 7 years, does it really address what you guys as representatives, leading representatives of industry, see as the changing skills needs of this environment? Thank you.
Well, will I be brave enough to answer? Charles, I think the answer to your question is no. I think if you talk about the infrastructure or the training infrastructure that is in place, it's not responsive enough. I don't think it's in touch enough. However, I think if all of us were to play the blame game, we'd actually get nowhere. And I think we, as industry, are equally responsible for not thinking ahead. And I can tell you in my interaction with leaders in the industry, not many of them are in touch with it and have given much thought to what the future requirements of their people will be, the future skills requirements of their people will be. So I think we need to get our own house in order before we point fingers at anybody else. Also, once a year, of course, as industry, we sit together with our CETA, in this case the TITA, and we give them a critical skills list. These are the things that we need, and from there they build programs around it. It is a lengthy process, but it is there, and it is up to us to drive that process. I sometimes think that we as industry are too meek and mild in the role that we play. I think we've got to step it up, and I think the authorities need to understand that we are a critical part. We're their customer base, and they need to listen to us. And we need to be more forceful in getting things across. We need to stop playing political games and just get on about the true skills of people that are required. But I think the first thing is designing and agreeing on what the future requirements of training are for our specific industries, to pass that on and to discuss that with the authorities so that we can get what we want. So George mentioned some of the short-term things. So the short-term thing, for example, in the international environment, are customs skills training. We spoke earlier on about big data and so on. Those are quite narrow professions. So across the board right now, I mean, can you believe that the biggest problem we have in the courier industry is the shortage of scooter drivers? Because if you have a look at what is becoming known as Q-commerce or quick commerce, this is this sort of same day, almost immediate. Have a look at the grocery deliveries within 1 hour. It's conducive to a scooter, not to a van. It's quick, small loads getting in and out. So we have a requirement. Well, I can tell you in SAPA for about 3,500 to 4,000 people to be trained up as scooter drivers right now. So we've got all these things, but these are all now stuff. What about tomorrow? And what about the day after tomorrow? What are we going to require then? And that's what we need to be thinking about. So a lot of work has been done by SAF and ourselves in developing almost skills paths for the various components of our business. So if you take in operations, for example, what is the skills path? What is the natural development? How do you then decide on the type of training that's required for each layer of development from the top to the bottom of an organization? So a lot of work has been done in that, in designing this. So if you, for example, are in sales, what is the progress in sales? What is your normal growth and skills required when you might join, let's say, a telesales operator up to a key account manager or a sales director, whatever your structures are? What are the skills required and what is the training required? And I think that's the thing that we're working through at the moment. It's really exciting development, Charles. And so I think to answer your question, in our view, things are slow, cumbersome, they're not well funded. I think money has been misspent and not necessarily meeting the requirements of the market, but the market itself needs to step up and start to play a bigger role in designing training requirements for the future. So that was more than 5 cents, so maybe that was 10 cents worth.
Harry, could I jump in and just add? I think I think also some of the large organizations, and I'm talking specifically sort of from a DSV perspective, I think we have a responsibility to also step up and to support that whole development and training initiative. I think what's interesting, and again, I realize that this is not necessarily the future, but we are really struggling with individuals in our industry. We're struggling with, to get key individuals to join our industry, and there's really sort of a lack of people interested, I guess, in the supply chain as well. So for us, it's very important to build skill internally as well. We've gone to a lot of the universities and people that come straight out of school to build them up internally and to develop these skills. So learnership courses, graduate programs, etc. But also from a developmental perspective, or investment perspective. So to your point, the scooter drivers, which is key, because sometimes it does require an investment. So I know from a DSV point of view, we needed trucks and we needed truck drivers. So we got a lot of self-owned drivers. So you own your own truck, you're your own driver, but you get incentivized about all the deliveries that you do, which is a really great initiative and a great investment. But I think a lot of the training and initiatives that we also require will have to be developed and sort of built in some of the organizations. Yeah.
Thanks, Sharon. Juanita, I know SAF plays a major role in terms of development. Anything that you'd like to add to Charles's question?
Yeah, I think you're right, Gary, is that, and maybe that's what we found over the last 2 years, is that we don't have in South Africa good public partnership models. And it seems when you engage with government that they don't appreciate business because business play a blame and a shame game. And then also it seems that sometimes if they open up too much, we will explore their weak points. So I think that's what we found in our engagement, that we as a country is not in a good space because we don't have matured to have those partnerships be robust and help each other. So I guess, I'm not negative on that, but it's going to take us a little bit, maybe let's say another 3-6 months to step back to say that how can we develop this relationship without blame and shame, and how can we work towards each other without showing the light on the faults because there's many faults, but we need to say, what can we do? And Sharon is correct. I think we also scout from around the universities, the colleges, and we see that not a lot of people stay in our industry because we want them to start with a controller, work up to middle management, work up to senior management, to executives and all of that. It seems between the middle management, they exit to other industries. And that's what we need to find out. Why is the reasons that they exit to other industries? And we have done an investigation, I think it was together with CIPA, there was a team under the 4IR that was looking, I can't remember the lady's name, to find out what is the root cause. Because I think if we know what's the root cause, we can at least get the people to stay in the industry because that's what we want. We don't want the institutional memory to go out of the industry. But I will stop here. You're right. We work around the clock to make sure that we keep good people in our industry, because we all know that if the logistics industry is collapsing, we might as well stop trading because then there's no future.
Yeah, it's interesting to note while we're talking about aviation, if you have a look at what's happening overseas at the moment, the number of passenger flights, particularly, that are being curtailed because of shortage of staff, shortage of skills. So they've had this over during COVID, where the industry almost collapsed and everybody had to find new jobs. And so this is a lousy game to be in. And now that it's picking up, the thing holding them back is actually a skills shortage and a labor shortage. We don't have that in South Africa. And in fact, you can imagine with the demise of Comair, there are thousands of people actually on the market at the moment that have airline type skills. I think I think what we're talking about is specific supply chain skills that we need. But I'd also like to put another thing to the panel, and that is just recently in SAPA, we've come across a kind of a revelation in terms of dealing with the authorities. It's really simple. And the problem is that we don't respect or understand each other's agendas. So we come at it from a business perspective, and we are mistrusted because it is believed that our agenda is about making money. True, we have to make money. We have to stay in business. We're not subsidized by anybody. If we don't make money, we're gone. So we can't be, bashful about that. But it seems as though government's thoughts about business are that that's the only thing that drives us, is money, finished. We then, on the other hand, look at them and don't really understand what their agendas are, department by department, and the people that we're dealing with. And I don't know that we're asking enough questions to get to the point of, what do you want out of this? Where do you want to see it? And then finding a way where we can align ourselves to meet each other's objectives. So I really think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's about understanding the objectives of the various parties involved. And I think we are working way past each other, Charles, in terms of your question about the authorities right now. So I don't think, we can throw stones at, for example, the seaters at the moment. I really don't. Okay, can we move on, Willem?
Gary, thanks, and thanks to all the presenters and Harry for setting up the forum. There's an underlying theme of uncertainty in the background, and one of the responses to that is to have some kind of flexibility in the system. So I have a question to George. You mentioned the hybrid air transport model. Now, I'm familiar with the concept in passenger airlines, low-cost carriers versus conventional full fare type services. What is the content of that in the air cargo market? What is a hybrid air cargo transport model? If you could maybe just edify me on that, please.
Thanks. So from an express perspective, what we were talking about there was the use of commercial airlines, maybe intercontinental connections. So you would have you'd have an intercontinental connection, and then we've got our own equipment that does the next leg. So the next sector is done by a yellow aircraft, and maybe then onto the destination the yellow aircraft, or maybe then again it goes onto a commercial airline as well. So that's where we were talking about hybrid, is using, because if we look at South Africa, we saw SAA go in 2020 and all their routes caused chaos. As we got Airlink now who are stepping in. I think we got FlySafair now as well, looking at the routes. So they're gradually taking those, but we were rerouting some of our aircraft just to pick that up. So where we'd never used the DHL aircraft, and this actually happened all over the region, is where there's some countries that had not seen a DHL aircraft for maybe 10 years, and then all of a sudden we got the flying permissions, etc., and we started going in. And in some countries we were the only aircraft in the air. So, and we had some really lovely, at JOC, we had some really lovely letters from customers saying, this COVID, you're the only aircraft in the air, but at least we know we're connected to the world. And that's living our purpose, as DHL Express, is connecting people, improving lives. And that really sent the message home to the JOC. And certainly African Management Board, that we were actually making an impact.
Willem, does that answer your question?
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, George.
Are there any other hands up, Harry?
Gary, not that I can see. There's also no questions on YouTube on this stage. I think maybe that one question from Sandra Gertenbach. To what extent is South Africa keeping abreast of digital technology that enables supply chains? Are the developments integrated?
sorry, I'm just trying to find
No, I can reread it again. To what extent is South Africa keeping abreast of digital technologies that enable supply chains? How are the developments integrated? I think UNITA would also be able to answer that one or comment on that one.
Maybe I can try, Harry. I think for us in private sector, it's always good because, I mean, we link with the world organizations and our members as well. Yes, maybe not the SMEs, but the middle and the large ones. So in that way, the South African logistics network is not falling behind because they've been shared the intellect and the systems are being upgraded and all of that. I think where we probably do fall behind is that our other government agencies or law enforcement agencies or regulatory environment is not digitalized. And that makes it very challenging because you will, and I think that's where the disjointment comes. You work with the private sector that's top notch because they've been forced to work top notch to stay abreast, because we have many things in South Africa that holds us back. So it's an inherent resilience that we have in our business community to stay abreast. But we struggle with that disjointment. And I think that's what earlier to what Gary was saying is that we need to find mutual ground between government and that's for me one of my personal goals, that I need to make sure that we mature on this dialogue journey to help each other. Because if we as a country don't get that dialogue right and don't get the maturity in our engagement with government, we are not going to move forward. It doesn't, and as Gary was saying, if we don't feel we're victorious, then we fall into a victim scenario, and then we blame and shame, and that's unfortunately not going to help the logistics network. But I think, to be honest with you, the logistics network is very much intact and very much digitalization. It's just to make sure, and that's maybe my concept, the shared infrastructure and the shared responsibility, because we need to find the sweet spots. But thank you, Larry, Harry, for that difficult questions.
And could I ask, just add on to that, Juanita? I think it's very hit and miss in South Africa. So we've got SARS, who are quite pro integration, where data, customs data, etc. And then we have Port Health, who I think have one computer in their entire department. Which, and it's all very hit and miss. And I think we need, as maybe SAPER, is to continue that fight, Gary, because we've got to drag them kicking and screaming into the 21st century one day, for the good of our customers and for the good of the good of the industry and the good of the end consumer as well, because there's still huge delays with things going through Port Health at the moment.
Maybe, Gary, if you'll allow me just to help George in that. George, you're quite right. But what we found in our government when we deal with them, they're all very scared of this scenario that we're coming out of the Zuma era, if I can call it that. So now they hide behind the Public Finance Management Act. So if they hide behind that, then it stops them to go with what is the real private sector participation model that we need to pursue. Because now it's like, I'm too scared, I'm going to favor one company above another company. So yeah, I think our best thing is that we drive it via the associations and protect our members and we engage. That's what we see. And I think myself and Gary is very much aligned with that, because we need to, I believe we will get out of it, and it makes us as a nation, South Africans, so strong that we need to mature and we need to have that resilience back. And one thing I believe that I pride myself of, we have a huge level of resilience. I think better than any other nation, I must say that.
Yeah, you guys talking about drone deliveries and so on. I had the privilege I had a visitor from Saab International as an SAAB on Tuesday evening, and he told me obviously lots of interesting things, what's happening international in terms of air traffic navigation, all this stuff, and new technologies, and I was amazed, or I'm humbled But the discussion went around also drone deliveries and of the future, but also drone taxis. You know, talking about commercial aircraft and belly cargo, and thinking about, can you in the future talk about belly cargo in terms of a drone taxi? I won't be one of the passengers in a drone taxi. That's for sure. But that's on a lighter note.
Harry, that's always the thing that comes up is about drone deliveries and so on. I mean, in the courier industry alone, let alone every truck that is going out there from delivering retail goods, but just take business to consumer goods. There are thousands upon thousands of deliveries a day. I don't want to live in a world where I've got to use an armored umbrella in case a drone falls on my head, trying to deliver those thousands and thousands of packages every day. And I certainly think there's a place for them. I'm battling to grasp the universal use, other than in specialized environments, for drones at this point in time. Just the sheer volume of business, you make it really, really difficult. So, I mean, you've seen fantastic stories of drones delivering medication to difficult to reach areas and so on, and that's fantastic. But, you know, down the road, I wouldn't be surprised if every cargo airplane is actually just a huge drone. But that's not going to be, you can see the color of the hair, it's not going to be in my lifetime, I don't think. Yeah, but it's a nice thing to look at that kind of technology, but it does have its limitations.
Yeah, absolutely. I see Calvin Paul's hands up.
Hi, good morning, everyone. To the panel, I just want to ask, I mean, we've obviously, over these few minutes now, the big discussion has been around government's role and, how they are assisting the industry. Can I just ask, is there a soft pushback from the industry to government, or is it very firm in making them understand that if certain things maybe is not implemented from government side, it really curtails the industry? And I mean, you guys are really doing your utmost in keeping the logistics industry afloat and getting things moving. But it just sounds like government is not stepping up and doing what they need to. So my question is there a soft or firm pushback to them for responses?
In my view and my experience, it's a mixture of both. There are occasions when there's a hard pushback, and there are other occasions where you have to tread softly and bearing in mind, government calls the shots. It controls the regulations. It controls the rules. It controls the road. It controls the airspace. And if we end up in an adversarial situation where we can't work together, certainly I can tell you our industry and then government too will lose. So it's not in our interest to be confrontational, but I mean, certainly there are in a lot of instances hard pushbacks. There's also the realities of dealing in this uncertain world and in a government, as Juanita said, which is also finding its new feet, so to speak. And very nervous of missteps. And we have to also appreciate those. And that's why I made the comment earlier on about let's understand each other's agendas here. I can tell you there are a number of really good initiatives coming out of local government, Gauteng Department of Transport, for example, positive initiatives. And they're working with stakeholders in the industry to try to make things work. So it's certainly not all negative by any means. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
I think, Gary, just also to jump in, so from an international perspective, so we as DSV, again, I mean, I think we work extremely closely with the South African Revenue Services. They we're not obstructive, they're not obstructive, and they're very much aligned to want to facilitate trade. And a lot of the time, the RCG implementations, they work very closely with us and collaborated and wanted to understand what is best practice, how it works, etc. So I definitely don't think it's all negative. They can be quite, we can definitely work together.
Yeah. Juanita?
Gary, I think it's about breaking the, it's the perception. It's breaking those long-held perceptions of government about the private sector. And I think we've seen a lot of work, especially at DHL Express and across the courier industry, in breaking down those barriers over the last couple of years. We've really sort of like made some really big strides. With SARS, we're working so much so closer now, and the actual relationship, the actual day-to-day working relationship has improved probably tenfold. I think there's a lot more trust there, but there's a lot more to do as well across the industry. So yeah, but I think we're going in the right direction.
Juanita?
Yeah, Gary, I actually don't even reply to that because I think we all know that we work very nicely with government. But I think what our challenge is that there's not a coordinated approach, because if we look at the logistics industry, it covers the DOT, Department of Transport, it covers the DPE, it covers the DTIC, it works with SARS, it works under the DTIC with the other government agencies. So the logistics network, if it was just one modality or let's say one infrastructure, it would be easy to address. But it is the complex structure, the complex departments, and then also in the community, you must also understand we have labor, we have government, we've got business, and we've got community. So, and that comes back to Gary's earlier point. We need to deliver the insights, and we need to create the understanding, and we need to get onto the common page. And that is, I don't believe we achieve anything if we get the hard approach, because that will also not help us. But I also have of the firm belief we can't wait until everyone is on the same page before we move forward, because that delay very important decisions, and then maybe the outside world will think that we don't have leadership and we do nothing. So I think it's to strike that balance, and that's just my personal view. So please don't go out and say it's a Transport Forum view, but that's my personal view. I think we need to accelerate the decision making a little bit, work inclusive, but not wait until everyone is on the same page, because with that we do injustice to our logistics industry.
Yeah, thank you. Kelvin, does that answer your question?
Yes, so lots of informative stuff coming out there, and yes, obviously from the industry, always positive things. And like Juanita said, I think very good comment from her side. Thank you for that. That we can't go hard, but you also need to get people on board, especially from government, so that they can understand that, especially from our side in terms of a retail company, we want to service the South African market, and not just the South African market if we're able to export. And I mean, government plays a huge role in that, in assisting you guys as logistic providers to assist companies in achieving that. So yeah, thank you for all the feedback. Much appreciated.
Okay, thank you, Harry. Are there any other hands up? Because I see we're about out of time here.
Yeah, Gary, thank you very much. I think what we should do, mind, from a Transport Forum side, I just want to give special recognition again to Birthday Cargo for hosting this event. And thank you for Gary, the CEO of Birthday Cargo, for moderating. Really appreciate that. So Gary, if we can ask maybe the panelists to do some closing remarks, and then we have Gary then closing the session for us as host and moderator. So maybe we can have George, and then we'll have Sharon, and then Unita, some closing remarks, and then we'll have Gary closing the session. But from a Transport Forum side, thank you very much for your participation. We really appreciate that. So George.
Okay, thank you, Harry. So I think my closing remarks is we're not out of the woods yet, but there is light in the tunnel, and Eskom haven't switched it off yet. So yeah, we're there. I'm expecting in the next 12 months or so, we're going to be, hopefully out of that COVID babalass.
It's George. Sharon.
So Harry, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think what came out loud and clear from everyone, and I think we all agree that it's very unprecedented times, unforecasted, times ahead, and I don't think any of us really know what to expect. But again, and Juanita mentioned it a few times, and so did the other presenters and comments, is that we are resilient. We do find opportunities and challenges. And I think that's what we need to hold on to as an industry and as a country. And we just need to remain positive and support each other. I think that also came out loudly, is that the collaborative approach and working together, supporting each other. We can't succeed in silos. So this is a great forum. And once again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Sharon. Juanita?
Yes, thank you, Gary and Harry, for hosting this event. I think you help us tremendously, because if you did not organize this event, we will not be able to speak to each other and share insights, because we're all in our different environment. So thank you for that. And my last message will just be, and that's what I've seen, we mustn't be constrained in our thinking by the known solutions. It's maybe time to explore some other solutions. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, everybody. I mean, just in closing, we're trying to touch on the value chain. And the value chain, really, this is a high-level value chain. But if you have a look at the total sort of involvement and stakeholders in the industry, it's vast. So you take a shipper, who might be a manufacturer or a distributor, as a first-tier player, and all of the people that rely on him. And then you take the freight forwarder or the courier, and all of the suppliers and so on that deal with them, whether it's vehicle manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, scooter manufacturers, facilities managers, and so on. And then you operate aircraft. You've got people that load the airplane, people that fuel the airplane, airport authorities, traffic and navigation services. Just parking of airplanes is a nightmare. So, and it goes on and on and on. So we look here at a kind of first tier, for lack of a better word, players in the value chain. But actually, there are so many second and third tier people that rely on us to keep this supply chain open, this air cargo supply chain viable. And if you have a look at the demise of Comair, and one reaches out to the 11 or 1,200 people in this time round, but it doesn't end there, because the people that have been handling Comair's airplane, they had 700 people who are impacted. The people that maintained Comair's airplanes, they're impacted. The fueling companies, goes on and on and on and on. So we have a real responsibility as leaders in this industry to keep it going and to explore every opportunity to make it viable and to give it a future. So we've just touched on the value chain in this forum. But thank you, everybody, for your participation, to the speakers especially, but to all of the participants. I hope it was interesting, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Gary, for moderating. Also, thank you very much, Muriel Saad, helping to compile this agenda. Thank you very much, and we'll see you guys again soon.